good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone. Thank you. This isn't scripted, but I'm sure most of you guys have some family members here and you're gonna go visit the magical kingdom. I just got my hair and makeup done. I've never had it done before, not even for my wedding. Honestly, I feel like I should be giving you the weather report and not talking about artificial intelligence, but it was kind of a magical experience in my own right. How do I begin? I'm in the space of artificial intelligence, and I'm getting whiplash. I can't even imagine what it must be like when you're not in this space. I always make the joke of you can't even bump into an air molecule without hearing AI powered, AI this, AI that. It's like we're starting to hit fatigue. There's no doubt about it. But I want to share a little fun fact with you. I'm going to give you guys a second to wake up. Can anyone guess what teenage talk means? This is the PG version, by the way. 3 letters, starts with S. Come on, chuckles, chuckles. It's okay. Yes, yes, it's a 3-letter word, SEX. And I don't want to say that there's hype associated with it, because there's not. It is taking over. But there's an element of reality of what's happening with artificial intelligence, what it takes to deploy artificial intelligence, and why we're not hearing about 80% of the failure stories and only 20% of the success stories. So part of my job today is really to break down the reality from hype. But before we go into that, I did want to give a little bit of a background and introduction. I had an opportunity to take a look at the companies you represent, some of the individuals that are here. You all are successful in your own right, in your own industry. And I'm sure you are being inundated with LinkedIn articles, with news articles, with Instagram feeds, AI this, AI that. So I felt that it was important I built some credibility with you all and why I'm here. This is not what I do for a living. I am not a professional speaker. I am fundamentally a practitioner. I grew up building. What I do is build. I build tech, I build capabilities, I build teams, I build organizations to be able to leverage these. And I've got about over 200 plus deployments under my belt. So I'm not reading and regurgitating whatsoever. And the next few minutes are really going to be an aggregation of my 20 plus years in the data space and 15 years in the AI space. Because I was very, very fortunate that in 2011, when IBM decided to take Watson to market, and Watson being Kit Jennings, I was a part of that original team. So I helped evolve and take Watson to market in healthcare and financial services. So a lot of fun failure stories. But I always say it's kind of like owning a vineyard. You have to put in a lot of money to make a lot of money. In this case, I had to have a lot of failures to have a few success stories. So I kind of understand what goes into it now. But in the process, just as a little bit of a fun fact, show of hands, how many of you guys grew up saying that you're doing exactly what you're doing right now? Like this is what you wanted to do for a living. Raise your hands if this is exactly what you wanted to do for a living. I see a few. Like 2. What about this side? Ooh, grim. I think I see 1. We grow up with different understandings and learnings. And if anyone comes from a cultural background, I'm Persian by trade, the only options were doctor or engineer, or you could be the second place doctor, which was a dentist. Like nothing else was really allowed. So the fact that I'm in this space is quite an anomaly. But oddly enough, I was a professional rugby player. I went to Berkeley. I majored in chemistry. I wanted nothing to do with chemistry. I played water polo. I wasn't good enough to be first string, so I was second string in a Division I school. And I said, okay, what am I going to do with my life? And interestingly enough, a week later, a coach tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, have you ever played rugby before? What on earth is rugby? Well, it's kind of like football without pads. Why would anyone play that? We're not built for that. Why would I purposely want to get tackled? Well, it turns out, all my deficiencies in water polo, because I was short, I'm 5'3", but I was stocky. What was my weakness in water polo turned out to be my strength in rugby. I was harder to tackle, low center of gravity. And it was interesting because I thought I was going to be a professional athlete my entire life. But what happens when we age? Recovery takes longer. A good night out, maybe a pickup game. We just don't bounce back the way we used to. And for good or for bad, that's actually what started my journey, because I applied everywhere. And the first opportunity and job opportunity I got was to be a data engineer at a bank. Ugh. But it was amazing, and I fell in love with the space. And I pursued it even though no one understood what I did for a living. My mother still thinks I fix computers for a living, just to put it into perspective. Long story short, was in the data space. I got recruited by IBM. I was a practitioner. Then I managed a small team. Then I managed a large team, and things just kind of grew from there. And then in 2011, when Watson began Jennings, IBM said, okay, we're ready to take AI to market. And Watson really was the first commercial AI product, but it was only available to enterprises because back in 2011, it was really expensive to run these models. And I'll give you some fun facts later on. But then after that, I was a partner at Ernst & Young. Then I was the first chief AI officer, first chief data officer. And I've serviced some really, really amazing employers. And I just recently left Amazon as their head of technology for North America for their startups division to actually join a cybersecurity company and start a passion project of mine called the Human Amplification Index, which is HAI, get it, human and AI, because I do believe that humans need to come first. But we'll get more into those details a little bit later. So that's just a little bit of a background about me. We're going to geek out just maybe for about 30 seconds, but I wanted to introduce you to the evolution of data and why we are where we are. Without going through all the details, just notice the time span from the 1950s and the 1990s and the evolution of our capabilities, tools, and systems. That's a 40-year gap. That took a really long time. Then we started getting into data warehouses, business intelligence, analytics. We weren't even into advanced analytics. Data sciences, models, and algorithms weren't a massive thing just yet. But as data storage became commoditized, workloads became commoditized, infrastructure became a lot cheaper to run, cloud became democratized, boom. We hit a very, very important injunction point here. And interestingly enough, the explosion of data, which had an absolute impact on how we were able to build these capabilities with artificial intelligence, all came through. Everyone wanted a commerce site, social media, IoT. These are all engines that produce massive, massive, massive amounts of information that can be gobbled up by these AI engines and models and algorithms so that we can get the outputs that we want. And that's when the role of the chief data officer was born. Now we hear about the role, we don't necessarily know what the role does, and it does take different shapes and forms. But what you need to take away from this is that's how important data became. And that's why you hear things like data's the new oil, data's our greatest digital asset. All very, very true. So much so they felt that there needed to be a focus. And that's when you hear the birth of all these other terms. But then there was an inflection point. There was a big boom in our industry. Compute, storage, and many other factors, right? The volume, the variety, the velocity of data, all contributed to us finally being able to run these models at scale, and Gen AI was born. Now, that was a history of data. History of AI. Interestingly enough, it's not a new capability by any means. It has been in academics and R&D as early as the 1920s. Some even argue earlier than that. But we really didn't hear about it. And interestingly enough, the term artificial intelligence was coined in 1970 at a Dartmouth conference. Now granted, I'm not a big fan of the word artificial intelligence. It's a big sci-fi thing, and I don't think anything's artificial per se, because we've had to build and create a lot of things. But it was Dartmouth, it was the 70s. There's a lot of extracurricular activities going on, which led to coining that term. But I do want you to also understand a few inflection points. I don't know if most folks remember this or not, and I don't think IBM gets the credit that it deserves. But in 1997, the first machine, Deep Blue, was televised against the world's greatest chess player, and the machine won. Fast forward to 2011. The machine beat Ken Jennings, the world's best Jeopardy player, and the machine won. We move forward, we move forward, and then the next big inflection point was in 2023. Now, ChatGPT was released in I would say 2022, but most of us didn't hear about it in 2023. Show of hands if you heard about it through your children who may be in university. Okay, so show of hands if you heard about it in 2022. Okay, think about 10, 15%. 2023? A majority of us. Okay, great. We had access to it in 2022, but it really hit critical mass in 2023. Now, why is this even possible? I don't know about you guys, but yes, I'm aging, but I shouldn't be losing my memory as much as I am, or at least I don't think I should be. I should also think I should be cognitively strong. I should not be so fragmented. I was like, what's going on? I don't understand. Why can I not stay focused? And now I have to intentfully focus. I have to legitimately turn off distractions. And I'm like, what is happening? And what I didn't realize, and when I put all the pieces together was, 100 years ago, in the 1900s, back when people could memorize entire novels and poems, information doubled every 100 years. All right, well, in the mid-1900s, so let's say 45, information doubled every 25 years. I hate to say it, but the last stat now, information doubles every 12 hours. This was as of 3 months ago. It's now every 8 hours. With the amount of information coming to us, it is nearly impossible to stay focused and to comprehend, because we are literally Amazon priming even the information we're reading. Articles, emails, PDFs, contracts, we don't have time. Our long list of to-dos is expanding more than we can keep pace with. And so we're having to speed date all of the content, which is why we're not able to retain the information. But even though we as humans are experiencing this fragmentation or distraction, this is actually what's powering all the artificial intelligence models. So AI is amazing in the sense that it has fundamentally democratized all the data in the world. Now, we're not talking about copyright issues. We aren't getting into IP issues. We'll leave that aside. But the fact of the matter is we are all one prompt away from almost every information. But here's what I caution you. Just because something's on the internet, is it true? Guess what's feeding it? Data on the internet. I am not teaching my children algebra. I am teaching my children common sense and discernment right now. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, because everyone has a voice now and everyone can post anything that they want. And that's the same information that's also feeding our algorithms. So I always say, use artificial intelligence perhaps to outsource your tasks, but do not outsource your critical thinking. Because just because it's telling you something, it doesn't mean it's factual. And so there's still an element of common sense, critical thinking, and discernment that has to go into these amazing capabilities that are available to us that have completely democratized data and information. But it has not democratized intelligence or wisdom. And that's why what you do matters. And that's why how you use AI really, really matters. Okay, fun fact. I can't even tell you how many boards I go in front of or how many executives I talk to one-on-one who don't even know what AI is yet. They can't define it. They know it's magical. They're getting pressures to deploy it. But if you ask them, what is artificial intelligence? They struggle, they fumble. There's a lot of ums and oohs. So back in 2018 with MIT, this was amazing. And I pressure tested it against my mother, and she understood it. So if you want to have this little fun fact, holidays, summer vacations, plane rides, it's really easy. In its most simplest way, here's how to think about what is and is not artificial intelligence. Let's use the 5 senses. My favorite is, can it see? It can't see, it's not AI. If it can see, like you're looking through a screen, can it identify what it sees? If it cannot, sorry folks, you got a camera. If it can identify what it sees, it's taking a picture of a cat, and it can recognize it's a cat. Now you're starting to get into image recognition and computer vision. This is a vertical within artificial intelligence. All right, my second favorite one, because I have arguments with finance teams all the time on the difference between forecasts and predictive models. I know, sorry, it's a very geeky thing to have, but this is what we do for a living. You give it massive amounts of information. Can it find patterns in that information? So let's say you give it a CSV file or you give it an Excel spreadsheet. If it cannot, it's not AI. But if it can, okay, we're getting closer. Can it actually help you make business decisions? Next best action, recommendations. If it cannot, it's mathematics. You now have to interpret what you want to do with it. But if it's actually able to assist you and aid you in business decisions, you're now getting into the realms of machine learning. The machine is learning from past, multiple variables to be able to help you come up with recommendations. Now, you still have to apply your discernment, your experience, your judgment call, because there are nuances across industries, sectors, company culture that, quite frankly, these models don't take into consideration. So it's not like, here's the answer, let me go do it. It's, here's the answer, now let me apply my value to understand whether or not it's appropriate for us. But this is a fun little cheat sheet of, is it AI or is it not? Now, how many of you are aware of Moore's Law? Ah, wonderful, this is my tribe. The notion of Moore's Law is things are just getting exponentially faster. And it's true. Have you guys ever seen or talked to a 12-year-old? And remember when you were 12 and go, holy cow, what's happening here? That's not what I was thinking about. Those aren't the conversations I was having. We are intellectually growing exponentially. We are systematically growing exponentially. We are, from a data perspective, growing exponentially. And from an innovation perspective, growing exponentially. And that earlier phrase that I was using of whiplash, it's true, it's legitimate. Now, some of us are going into it and we're like geeking out. Some of us are dabbling in it, it's a little bit overwhelming. And you can do what, quite frankly, a lot of my friends do, completely avoid it altogether. I'm just gonna wait until it impacts me and then I'll decide what to do then. I encourage you all to find your balance, but the fact of the matter is at least be aware. Things are growing exponentially faster, and you actually play a really important part as to how this shapes our future, whether you feel it or not yet. And hopefully this is some promising news. So let's talk about the state of AI. Some fun facts. Well, this one's not so fun, but I think it's important. $1.85 trillion of investments are going to go by the end of 2030. This is the power of infographics and storytelling. We hear the number 1.85 trillion. We know it's a lot. I'm going to ask you guys to participate in a survey. How many of you think that 75% of this amount is needed to solve world hunger? Show of hands. 50% of this amount is needed to solve world hunger. 30% of this amount is needed to solve world hunger. I'm going to try this again. Let's raise our hands. Let's do it this way. How many of you guys think more than 50% of this amount is needed to solve world hunger? All right, we have a few. Less than 50%, but above 30%. That's the majority. 39% of $1.85 trillion is needed to solve world hunger. Let that sink in. That is how much we are investing. It's the greatest investment our global economy has ever seen. So much so, it's superseding the largest humanitarian effort of the world. That's how much is being invested. But here's a fun fact. Highest adoption rates: China, Singapore, India, and United Emirates, the ones in green. Lowest adoption rates: France, Spain, USA. With all due respect, we're on par with the country that still has siesta. Why on earth do we have such low adoption rates when we live in an economy and we're getting used that everything is AI powered, everything is AI created? And this is where the reality is starting to settle in. Yes, it's true, we're experimenting a lot, but if you talk about true adoption, there is a big difference between MVPs, proof of concepts, discussions, pilots, versus what actually gets flipped into production, but still not adoption, versus what is actually being adopted. There is a big gap and chasm between the two, and we are not in the adoption mode just yet. So now the question is why? All right, but let me share some stats. 74% of corporate AI initiatives are stalled and canceled at the MVP stage. These aren't the facts that we're hearing. 80% are failing due to high costs, privacy, and security risks. This is why I left my old employer to join my new employer. I want to solve security. Data security is a massive, massive, massive concern, issue, and something that we need to unblock if we're going to scale AI in a healthy way. And then 88% by IDC, AI POCs do not make it into production. These aren't numbers that are normally shared because it's just not fun to share these numbers. But why the difference between the $1.85 trillion and these low adoption rates? So let's fill in that gap for you. Oh, good, finally a chuckle. Come on, folks. Now there's a difference always between what we hear and the reality of where we actually are. I'll let you guys take a photo of this. I know some of you guys are interested. So the next few slides and the next few minutes together, we're going to talk about where that delta is. Now, just as a foundation, what I want to do is share with you just fundamentally the story of innovation. Innovation is so, so hard. How many of you are builders? And it doesn't matter if it's in your garage, a hobby, trains, metal, wood. Building is difficult. Building is trial and error. So from conception to ideation, to brainstorming, to conceptualization, to design, to solutioning, to doing and building, to producing, and then to making it available, and then to commercializing it, and then for it to hit critical mass, it's quite a few steps. And these things take time. So let's talk about some of the most basic commodity items that, quite frankly, I was astonished when I read some of these stats. The refrigerator, something that even third world countries in their homes have within the communities, took nearly 50 years to adopt. The cell phone, our third limb practically, took over 20 years to adopt. Computers, the internet, I mean, these are some pretty long timelines before things became democratized. But guess where we are now? This for me is important because I'm going to walk you through, if you're on a committee or in a team that's leveraging AI or needs to deploy AI, but also for your own personal longevity. Because opting out is not an option, unfortunately. Now, if you're going to retire in 4 to 5 years, no problem. You can just go to sleep right now. Life is good. You're chilling. But if you are not going to retire in the next 4 to 5 years, you have no choice but to wake up. And not from a place of fear, but from a place of wisdom. AI is going to redefine the workforce, there's no doubt about it. But we as humans have to constantly, regularly reinvent ourselves as well. So the question is, if you are a subject matter expert, if you are a builder, if you are a content creator, if you're a marketer, and what you do is create the art of the possible in your own way. If you're in sales and you build relationships, what value are you going to provide in 3 to 5 years when the world is trying to automate everything? You have no choice but to think about it. So let's get into some of the fun stuff. Why some of those grim earlier numbers? Well, first and foremost, lack of foresight. How many trends do we have every 2 to 3 years? Web 3.0, metaverse, blockchain, big data. Like, there's just a new term that constantly comes up every 2 to 3 years. We jump on the bandwagon, and then we go to the next big buzzword that hits us every 2 to 3 years. This one, unfortunately, is not a buzzword. It is here to stay. Second, organizational inertia. This has always been my favorite. Sometimes when I've gone through my interview process, I hear about amazing words like innovative, competitive advantage, we want to be cutting edge, and that's the aspiration. Sometimes I get hired, and I give them the team, the budget, and what it takes to actually match those buzzwords, and we fall short. The perspiration doesn't always match the inspiration. And so that delta, fundamentally, we just don't always get the resources that we need to be able to develop these capabilities in the timeline that they're requesting. Third, with AI, is there is an element of resistance. And we'll get into this in a few slides later, but we are going to market saying that AI is going to replace jobs. AI is going to displace jobs. With all due respect, why would any knowledge worker use AI? Why would you use a tool that's going to replace you? Like, we just don't see enough enterprises and organizations, and this is something I'm trying to change in investing in workforce preparation, to use AI as an enabler, as an enhancer, as an amplifier, not as a displacer. And so there is this back and forth, there is a little bit of resistance that's happening right now that is causing the low adoption rates. But the other big thing is the pace of change is fast. And this is where I'm going to ask. How many of you guys belong to companies that have 5 strategic priorities designated by the CEO and the executive leadership team? 5. Okay, 6 strategic priorities. Show of hands. 7 strategic priorities. We have more of those. 8. Okay. Show of hands of which of those strategic priorities was dropped to make room for AI? I don't see anyone. That's right. This is moving so fast, we've tacked it on to an already busy schedule, an already busy agenda, with a lot of strategic initiatives focused around growing the business in very healthy ways. And because the pace is so fast, everyone is trying to catch up. But what happens when you prioritize speed over substance? We miss a few things. We forget to train the people that matter the most. We forget our workforce preparation. We think it's just plug in a tool and let's get going. And that's where some of the mindset shifts have to change. The other aspect of it is the A in artificial intelligence is very deceiving. It is not, I would say, there are some aspects of it that are remarkable, so it seems artificial, but the real deployments are focused on augmented, automated, and anticipatory. Let's automate the manual, let's augment a knowledge worker, and let's create predictive models. There's a 4th one coming in, like autonomous vehicles, agentic AI, but that hasn't hit critical mass just yet. The first 3 are where the center of gravity really, really is. There's also unrealistic expectations. When Watson went to market and beat Ken Jennings, it beat Ken Jennings with the 71% accuracy scores. How many of us would be celebrating that score if our kid came home from school and said, I got a C- on my test? We wouldn't. But that's how much smarter it was than a human, and it beat Ken Jennings. Then, in 2023, I was toying around. Our models could not tell the difference between a Chihuahua and a blueberry muffins. It can now. I typed in salmon and water. We clearly know the reference is a fish, not a fillet. We're getting better. Oh, my favorite, eggplant. Yeah. Now with context, all 3 of these have been solved, but there's other issues that we still got to work through. With all that said, no matter what you do or how you deploy artificial intelligence, depending on the use case, you all have to establish an acceptability threshold. What is good enough? It's not going to be 100%, but is it going to be better than what you have right now? And what is that level? So when you go through and deploy this, if it exceeds that level, you're golden. Okay, the next one. The workforce and not tech is the biggest blocker. We spend all of our time on picking models and very little time in our workforce preparation. It should be reversed. The next one is, not every business problem is meant to be solved by AI. If a scissor does a trick, why on earth would you introduce a chainsaw? Don't do AI for the sake of AI. There has to be, the problem has to match the solution. The next one, discernment. Just because it can be handled by AI and you've decided it should be handled by AI, doesn't mean it's an automatic case for, let's do AI. Depending on your industry and your sector, depending on the risks and the complexity, you have to discern what should be AI-led and human-powered, human-led and AI-powered, or no, the risk is just too much, it should be completely human-led at this point in time, or the risks and complexity are low, it should be AI-led. Practice discernment. The other aspects are misconceptions. This one won't matter as much, but just have this in handy. There's a difference between doing AI and using AI. If your company bought a bunch of Copilot licenses, are you doing AI or are you using AI? You're using AI. The operational business process reengineering is a fundamentally different imperative when it comes to doing AI and making it a fabric within your organization. And that's where time and energy really come into play. But yeah, sure, drop in a few Copilot licenses and use AI, no problem. In addition to that, if you are part of a committee or a council or an organization where you're establishing your use cases, this is probably the biggest secret that most people don't know, and I learned this after my 17th deployment, and they weren't going as well as I'd anticipated. This is going to be provocative. Do not pick your AI use case based on business value. I love that. Business value does get you in trouble for many reasons, but one, it is an Excel spreadsheet exercise with a lot of assumptions that go into it. And just because the use case has the highest calculated business value does not equate to your ability to actually deploy it. There are so many components that go into, is it critical for the organization, and can I even realistically deploy it based on my existing maturity, that have to be considered. So I created this framework, 2015, criticality versus complexity, things to consider. You guys can take a picture of this if you want, but business value gets you in trouble. I'm going to speed a few things up. 2 takeaways. If you're in the process, or if you're thinking, or if you are involved in your AI initiative within your organization, you could forget almost everything with the exception of 2 things. Data and workforce. You cannot skip those. Because the reality right now of AI deployments is where we're spending a majority of our time is tools and infrastructure. Where we should be spending a majority of our time is workforce preparation and data governance and security. It's reversed and flipped. So those numbers that we were seeing earlier is because of a reflection of this. Now, with that said, let's talk about what's going on. Just in terms of real-world examples and cases, we know AI is happening. And I would love a world where it's happening with us and not to us. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of precautions. In 2017, I called GDPR gosh darn pain in my rear. I was a chief data officer for a major corporation, and I was like, oh, this gets me away from building, but I have to do it. And the notion of GDPR is you had to opt into a situation so they could use your data. The situation now is the default is you are opted in. You have to actively opt out, which most of us never do because who has time? If you have Siri, if you have Alexa, if you have an iPhone 16, I haven't upgraded because Apple Intelligence is automatically embedded in and I can't opt out of it. So I'm not upgrading yet. Or what I found out about a year ago, LinkedIn. Every connection, every like, every comment, every message, all of it is being used to train their own foundational models. And they haven't told you about it. So you have to actively go in and opt out. So a few of us in the space, about, I think 6, 7 months ago, we provided links on our LinkedIn. Go opt out. Don't let them use their information. The challenge is most of us aren't even aware that that's happening. But go with this assumption. You are automatically opted in. You have to actively opt out if you don't want them using your information. Okay. With that said, all industries, all, are being impacted by artificial intelligence. And most functions are. But what I want you to take away from this is marketing and sales are still the 2 top use cases. Lower risk, lower complexity, that's where most organizations are going. But you'll get to know, yes, customer operations. That's my favorite use case, by the way. Second most. R&D, where you hear all the pharma, biotech companies, amazing. The takeaway from here is all industries are looking at it, all functions are looking at it, but sales and marketing is still leading at this point in time. Okay, this is the reality of what's going on. 83% of the world is using mobile devices. 58% of the world are using computers. Now we're talking about third world countries as well. That's how democratized it is. 2% of the world is using AI, and in our country, 27% of the population is using artificial intelligence. It's not an if, it's when. So this goes back to connecting what's the value that you're going to bring to the workforce in the next 3 to 4 years. And if you're still not believing me, quite not convinced, Instagram took 2 years to get 100 million users. ChatGPT did that in 2 months. That's how much the adoption has scaled. We are thirsty for it. We want it, but I don't think we've all been properly trained on how to use it. So artificial intelligence, no doubt, is the greatest investment, and quite frankly, force multiplier we have seen. Whether it's impacting you directly or not is a different story, but it's not if and and. Now, I'm going to wrap up in the next few minutes, and I'm going to go through these a little bit fast. But here's where I want you to think about yourselves, your community, your families, and your companies. First use case, FAA. All right. The Aviation Administration fundamentally has said, we have an issue. Pilots are too dependent on our automation systems. So in the case of emergencies, they can't react properly. And if you look at the past 10 years and those emergencies where, quite frankly, the pilot landed the plane, the one thread they all have in common is experience. But here's where we're wrong. We equate to experience with the number of years they've been flying. That's incorrect. The experience that they've had is they have learned manually how to fly the planes when the automated systems do not work. Or they have chosen not to weaken those skills over time. So in the case of emergencies, when things short circuit, the automation systems don't work, they still know how to navigate those planes, and they can land safely based on their own independent skills. They have not built an over-reliance on the technology to do the work for them. We, unfortunately, are. I'm going to give a case that's personally going to relate. How many of you guys use GPS? Next time you use GPS to go to your destination, put your car in park and see if you can retrace your steps. You won't be able to, because we have outsourced our memory and recollection to GPS. That's what's happening in a lot of functions, and that's what they're complaining about with the pilots. My favorite example is, how many of you guys have bought a car maybe in the past 8 years? Great. Front camera, back camera. It even buzzes when you change lanes. Have you tried getting into a rental car and parallel parking? Most of us won't be able to. There is an element to what I call brain rust, or intellectual atrophy, that's kicking in because of our over-reliance on technology. And not as a plug, but I have a TED Talk called Brain Rust and what's happening right now. And this is where discernment kicks in, because again, it's meant to support us, aid us, amplify us. We outsource tasks. It's not meant for us to outsource our critical thinking. So we've got to keep those muscles alive. The same goes in cases where we're using artificial intelligence to do oncology scans to find tumors. 7 months ago, I went into a hospital, and they're like, listen, we're using AI. It's amazing, but our litigation cases went up. Why? I'll give you the short version of it. They removed human in the loop, meaning the subject matter expert, instead of using AI to expedite, they used AI to abdicate the responsibility of the work. And so the doctor, yes, they were able to get through scans much quicker, but he wasn't reviewing the scans. And so we had to put the human back into the loop and say, it's easier being an editor rather than an author. Just because the results are negative, you still have to confirm if it's a false negative or a positive negative. But instead of you having to scan, and it may take a few minutes, now it takes a few seconds. But you can't abdicate the responsibility, and you always have to have a human in the loop. And last but not least, we hear about college students using ChatGPT to write essays. We hear about junior coders using Copilot licenses in ChatGPT to do code reviews. It doesn't matter what you're using it for. What I encourage you with your younger children, if you have children in college, with yourselves, if you bypass, if you short circuit the learning process, let's say in this case, writing an email, a big use case of ours, or being able to write a book or write an essay, you lose the ability to be able to storytell, to influence, to take different pieces of information and put them together in a cohesive way that has an impact when you deliver it. If you don't build that muscle, or like the muscle of writing code, when it gives you a response, you don't know how to discern whether it's right or wrong. You can't troubleshoot. You can't build those instincts that's going to tell you this feels on or this feels off. So the intention was never to abdicate or short circuit the learning process. It was help you to become an expert so that you could use these tools as a sidekick, to brainstorm, to understand to be able to access information that would take you years to access. But it wasn't meant to replace what you do best. So with all that said, I just want to close out and say, AI is amazing. There's no doubt there's remarkable capabilities, but like with any innovation, there's a good, there's a bad. Do not lose common sense. Sometimes you have to teach it to your children. Practice discernment. And whatever you do, yes, outsource tasks, but do not outsource your critical thinking. And then keep those lessons learned in mind if you're pulled into an AI-based project. Thank you so, so much.